Makoto was a clueless idiot who was isekai-ized as a hero until a goddess saw his ugly face and banished him. However, when he discovers his hidden powers, he joins forces with powerful monsters and girls who will do anything to help him get revenge. One night, Makoto was suddenly teleported to a void where a god named Tsukuyomi told him he was about to become an isekai hero in a fantasy world. When Makoto asked why he had been chosen without Truck-kun's knowledge, Tsukuyomi explained that his parents had already signed a contract, so he had no choice but to force him. As compensation, he granted Makoto an ability to help him survive, but just then, Makoto began to fade away. Tsukuyomi then explained that he was being summoned by the goddess of fantasy to a world with a lot of attitude problems and begged him to ignore her so she wouldn't exert her powers over him. When he arrived at her palace, she was about to begin the typical hero welcome speech, only to stop and burst into laughter at his face. She remarked that his face made even demi-humans look like models, so she told him to get over it. While he protested, she decided to grant him a useless ability that allowed him to speak in a demi-human language. Then she dropped him off the edge of the world, hoping he would die. But Tsukuyomi saved the day by freezing time. She revealed that Makoto wouldn't have died from the fall since summoned heroes had superpowers, and as compensation for how the goddess treated him, Tsukuyomi granted him an extra ability before disappearing. After Tsukuyomi vanished, Makoto performed a superhero landing and wandered through the mountains for days, but he couldn't find anyone around. Just when he was about to give up, he heard a voice calling for help, so he ran faster than the Flash and saw a two-headed dog attacking a half-human. When the monster charged at him, he easily dodged its attacks and finished it off with a kick that reduced the dog to a bloody mess. Afterward, he tried to cheer Emma up, but she was terrified by his gorilla-like strength, so he manipulated her until she finally agreed to talk to him. He introduced himself as Emma and informed her that she was on her way to be sacrificed to a dragon named Shen to improve the agricultural situation of her land. Out of gratitude, she decided to postpone her sacrifice and take him to a camp where she could wash the dirt off her body and relax. When they arrived at the camp, Emma served him some food, and when Makoto realized she was magically levitating some plates, he asked her to teach him magic. During her magic lesson, she summoned a fireball, and Makoto was able to mimic her incantations thanks to his language skills, allowing him to summon his own fireball. When she explained that magic worked with imagination, Makoto suddenly became a better firebender than Zuko, blasting the wall with his flames. Seeing this, Emma was astonished by his ability and assumed he must be above level 300, so she decided to administer an assessment test to find out. Unfortunately, the test revealed Makoto to be a level 1 fraud, which disappointed him, so she decided to teach him a few more spells to cheer him up. The next morning, Emma noticed Makoto was nowhere to be seen, but she found a note thanking her for teaching him magic spells and informing her that he had gone to confront Shen so he wouldn't have to sacrifice himself. When Makoto arrived at the mountain, he wanted to warm up by practicing his new magic. He created an arrow, which he fired randomly, but it ended up hitting a shrine and creating a large explosion. As he ran toward the shrine, he saw that his spell had roasted some monsters, so he apologized for the mess he had caused. However, the dying monster called him crazy and added that it was practically dead for destroying Shen's great shrine. After it crumbled, a fog immediately covered the area, and Makoto was ambushed by Shen, who took the form of a large green dragon. While dodging its attack, he noticed that the fog was getting thicker, so he activated his observation trick, which allowed him to maneuver and dodge with greater precision. When Makoto summoned some fireballs, Shen scoffed at her for trying to use a basic spell on her. However, the flame attack ended up causing significant damage, so she screamed in pain and was surprised because she was supposed to be fire resistant. After that, Makoto performed several backward movements one after another, which surprised her even more because she thought he was invincible. To stop him, she trapped him in an illusory barrier where her high school crush was located. She asked him out, but the young man couldn't organize his thoughts because he was distracted by her ample assets. As the conversation progressed, Makoto discovered some inconsistencies in the genjutsu, which allowed her to break free from the state, and she also discovered the nature of the power Tsukuyomi had given her. Apparently, it allowed her to create a semicircular area around herself and manipulate the space within it to make herself stronger. Using this ability, he easily passed through the barrier and prepared to unleash a flurry of blows on Shen. However, he realized the dragon was no longer hostile, so he halted his attack. Shen then explained that Makoto had some fascinating memories of the samurai she had met. Intrigued, she wanted to accompany him on his journey to learn more about them. Intending to become his master, she tricked him into making a pact with her, their roles determined by their power levels. However, during the ritual, he discovered the hard way that Makoto was stronger than Goku and dominated her so completely that she ended up becoming his servant. He then transformed into a human form, surprising Makoto, who wondered why he was wearing cosplay, but revealed that he was a samurai. When she asked if anything was bothering him, Makoto explained that his current situation was a headache because he'd been expecting to travel on the back of a dragon. She explained that in the contract, the weaker creature usually took the form of the dominant one, but Makoto complained that he didn't like being dominant. When she started talking about swords and samurai warriors, he realized that the part of her memories that had her hooked were the samurai shows he used to watch. He didn't have much of a problem with her obsession with the Edo period, but the plot reveals that her outfit was about to give her a nosebleed, so he begged her to change her appearance. However, she gave him permission to fantasize about her enormous assets as much as he wanted. He wanted her, and her masculine aura somehow put him off. Then she created a mist and revealed that the land beyond the mist was a demiplane that she controlled. When he asked if it was an illusion, she explained that it was a space they could enter and exit through mist gates and invited him to enter with her. After walking through the mist, he was surprised to find a beautiful grassy field before him. But when he asked Shen where they were, she said she had no idea. He was amazed that their demiplane had evolved from the emptiness it used to be. And when Makoto handed her a persimmon from one of the trees, she instantly loved it. When Makoto noticed many familiar plants around, he surveyed the area and was startled by its vastness. He also realized that the garbage goddess couldn't mess with him there since it was only accessible through Shen's mist gates. When he floated the idea of building a city there, Shen was interested but changed the subject and asked if it had anything to do with the Highland Orc sacrifices. She had no idea what it meant, so he asked her to accompany him back to the Orc village to clear up the misunderstanding. When they returned to the normal realm, Emma rushed to Makoto and warned him that it would be too reckless to fight Shen. However, Shen interrupted her, recounting how Makoto had beaten her during the battle, which left Emma confused. Seeing this, Shen explained that she had formed a contract with Makoto, making him her master because she was fascinated by him. Emma was still frozen with disbelief, so she handed him a pile of scales from the fight. When Shen asked if she believed him, his terrifying aura convinced Emma that he wasn't the dragon god, causing her to faint. Later that night, Emma asked Makoto where Shen was during her welcome home party, and he replied that she had gone to bed. With tears in her eyes, she thanked Makoto for saving her village, and he told her it wasn't a big deal before thanking her for her magic lessons. The next day, Makoto was astonished to see that all the orcs had packed their bags, so the orc leader explained that they had accepted Shen's offer to live in her sanctuary. When Makoto asked her what she was thinking, she explained that it was their contract that had improved the demiplane and reminded him of her plan to build a city there. To calm his nerves, she assured him that everything would be fine because she had brought a variety of creatures that lived there. However, Makoto worriedly asked how they would handle things if some dangerous monsters appeared in the area. At that moment, a small version of Shen appeared and assured him that she would fight any monster that attacked the orcs. She was frightened because she thought she had somehow fathered offspring with Shen, but Shen explained that it was a fragment of herself. When Makoto asked the orcs if they were sure about his decision, Emma said yes, all determined to support him in the new city. However, she was worried that they wouldn't have anywhere to live on the demiplane, so Shen transported the orc city to her sanctuary using mist magic. Several days later, Makoto was practicing magic and realized that she had the greatest affinity for water among the 5 elements. However, her practice session was interrupted by Shen, who began to talk about the historical dramas she was seeing in her mind. After she went to gather some materials, Makoto saw a floating memento of her parents and resolved to follow in their footsteps. Elsewhere, an elderly dwarf was fighting for his life as he was attacked by a massive spider monster called the Black Disaster. Back in the village, some orcs complained to Makoto that a large tree was too hard to cut down, so he demonstrated his powers by felling it with ease. When one of them showed him his wound, Makoto healed him instantly. He then pointed out that Makoto's healing didn't release mana, which made him realize he had his own personal power system called Kai. However, Kai couldn't heal his own wounds, so he bandaged his injured hand. At that moment, Shen returned, carrying the elderly dwarf, and informed him that the demiplane was under attack by a peculiar creature. When the Black Disaster appeared, Makoto asked Shen to help him face it, but she said she was too busy tending to the injured man. Makoto was told that the Black Disaster was an ancient creature so ravenous it could eat anything, and Shen revealed that he had fought it before. After deploying his power field, Makoto managed to sever one of its legs, but before he could finish it off, it regenerated and began attacking. Makoto then fired a flaming arrow at the monster and followed it with a brutal fire spell, but this only enraged the creature. When Makoto unleashed even more fire attacks, the spider regenerated and impaled him several times. It tried to eat him, but Makoto suddenly went into a rage and fired intense bursts of flame at the spider before finishing it off with a water arrow. However, the spider regenerated and began to flatter him, so Shen kicked it away and manipulated it until it agreed to make a contract with Makoto as well. When Makoto awoke, the black spider greeted him in her human form, and Makoto wondered why an S-level villain was suddenly standing before him. A few hours earlier, Shen had been healing Makoto's wounds and was surprised that he had no aptitude for healing magic. When Emma offered to help, she vowed not to leave a single scratch on her master's body and pushed her healing magic even further. In the present, the Spider Girl recounted these events to Makoto, and he remarked that Emma was an incredible mage before asking who she was. She introduced herself and said that she had obtained this form through their contract, but Makoto was astonished because he thought contracts required the consent of both parties. However, she granted him permission to enter her secret tunnel, and this made him realize that he might have been placed in the strangest isekai world of all time. When Shen and the old dwarf entered the room, Makoto complained about the contract that had been made without his knowledge. However, Shen explained that it was better than having a spider following him around, trying to sample his essence. He then revealed that the old dwarf was from an ancient subrace of dwarves who produced sacred and noble artifacts, earning them the distinction nation of elder dwarves. The man introduced himself as Baron and thanked him for saving his people from the spider. When Baron asked Makoto to allow his clan to move to his land, Makoto didn't even finish his sales pitch before agreeing. However, Shen stipulated that they had to help with the farming, pay their taxes, and acknowledge Makoto as their supreme ruler to remain on the land. Baron agreed and stated that it would take him 2 days to gather his people there. Then Shen gave him a gift to give to his family. When he saw they were dragon scales, he was startled, and Shen whispered some historical drama props she wanted him to make for her in return. A few hours later, Makoto left the demiplane to search for human settlements, something he did every day to follow in his parents' footsteps. When he saw a human village, he was excited to explore it, but before he could go any further, Shen appeared and said she had a special request for him. After returning to the demiplane, she told Makoto that she and the spider lady needed names, explaining that the villagers didn't know what to call them. Makoto started suggesting basic names for the spider, so she grabbed his arm and angrily demanded he give her a nice name. However, Shen separated them and demanded to be named first, so Makoto brainstormed for a while before settling on Tomoe. Since she was confused, he explained that Tomoe was the name of a brave woman he knew, and she immediately accepted the name. When Makoto remarked that she was beaming, he explained that receiving that name from her master increased her strength, so he scolded her for not telling him sooner. Then the spider girl asked for her name, so he started brainstorming again. When he remembered how hungry and tenacious she had been during their fight, he gave her the name Mio, and she instantly fell in love with it. A few hours later, Makoto was in a state of shock as he stood on a stage with his maids in front of several species of demi-humans he had never seen before. Tomoe and Mio introduced themselves to the crowd using their new names, and the people applauded in response. The duo then held a poll to determine the most appropriate royal title for Makoto, and it was decided that Makoto would now be called Young Master. When Makoto began to insist, they calmed him down by saying it was the result of a democratic vote, but he still urged them to call him by his given name. However, he noticed that everyone around him was looking at him with puppy dog eyes, so he agreed to respond to the name Young Master, which prompted everyone to applaud. Shortly afterward, Baron introduced Makoto to the chief of the Elder Dwarf village, named Elder, who asked if he had been given a mission by the goddess. Immediately after the goddess was mentioned, Makoto declared that he would never receive a mission from her and began ranting about all the bad things she had done to him. Elder said he was relieved to hear this because his opinions differed from the goddesses, and he agreed to side with Makoto. Then, Tomoe presented an army of mist lizardmen as her followers, which made Makoto feel uneasy, but she assured him they would serve him as well. At that moment, Mio introduced her followers, a group of spider monsters called Alke, and demonstrated their regenerative abilities before ordering them to support Makoto. Afterward, Makoto commanded all races to live in peace and immediately headed to the human kingdom, desperate to meet real people. He suddenly encountered a beautiful human girl, but when he approached her, his negative aura frightened her. When he reached the gate of the human city, he saw that the villagers had armed themselves to confront him. Before he could explain, they began firing arrows at him, forcing him to flee. He protected himself from the arrows using a force field and became enraged when he realized that the humans' negative reaction to him was caused by the goddess. When she told the others, they explained that humans were frightened by her terrifying aura, and Emma revealed that it was possible to suppress her mana. Because of this, she decided to learn human language and find a mana-suppressing item as well as a mask to disguise her appearance. A month later, she learned to manifest human language from her fingertips, and a merchant brought her a ring that successfully suppressed her mana. With her disguise now complete, she successfully entered the human city with the girls, and they soon arrived at a guild hall. There, the girls were evaluated and found to be the highest-ranking adventurers they had ever seen, with a level exceeding 1,000. However, when Makoto checked her rank, it was sadly still as low as before. That afternoon, Makoto and Mio were strolling through the city when a strange girl suddenly approached them. As the little girl struggled to speak, Makoto realized she wasn't lost, so he asked Mio to handle the situation. However, Mio was so harsh with her questioning that the girl started crying, so Makoto called her over to give her a whack on the head. She complained that the girl had ruined their sweet moment, but Makoto grabbed her by the nose while warning her not to threaten the child, which made the little girl laugh. Seeing this, Makoto apologized for scaring her and asked what she was doing there. His negative comment made her burst into tears, and she said she had a special request for them. While crying, Mio asked the girl to go away, but Makoto decided to take her to the inn, unaware that an adventurer was secretly watching them. At the inn, the girl introduced herself as Rino and revealed that she and her sister had been traveling together, but had ended up settling in that town. She then informed them that her sister had been missing for a month and added that she had been evicted from their rented house before bursting into tears again. Mio guessed that she had gotten into some kind of trouble, and similarly, Makoto finally understood why Zetsuya City had felt strange since she moved there. Meanwhile, some bandits tried to steal her car, but Tomoe was waiting for them. When they attacked, she drew her sword and knocked one of them out with a brutal kick. When the others attacked, she destroyed their weapons with a single slash, but surprisingly, their bodies were also sliced in half due to the blade's sharpness. One of the men fled, and when Tomoe tried to pursue him, another assassin blocked her path. She knocked him unconscious and took him hostage. However, when she returned to the inn, Makoto scolded her for killing the vandals and told her to thank Mio for handling the aftermath. When he disarmed the hostage, two enormous appendages suddenly appeared from his chest. He then yelled at Tomo for not checking her gender before bringing her there. She explained that it would have made her look strange, but he continued to berate her until Rinan called the other one. When she asked how Makoto had suddenly become so talkative, he tried to hide it by doing an imitation, but she mocked him for being embarrassing. Using his projection writing, he asked her to go eat some leftover food in the other room, but Tomo was shocked when she realized he was giving away his food without a second thought. He also offered her a spare bed to sleep in, which made Tomo lose her temper even more because it was her bed he was giving away. After thanking him, she showed him a sketch of his sister that she had made, and he instantly realized something was wrong. When Mio returned, she saw Makoto looking at the memories of his hostage and immediately noticed that something was amiss. She revealed that the robbers who attacked them were in the guild and added that they were somehow connected to Rinan. While looking at the sketch of Rinan's sister, Makoto revealed that she had been taken hostage by the assassins at a certain location and asked her to go and find her there. Mio said there was no need to rush, but Makoto pleaded with her, a dark look in his eyes. Then Tomoe offered to accompany Mio on this side mission while he looked after Rinan. After they left, Makoto looked at the drawing again and realized that Rinan's sister looked exactly like his childhood crush from Hasegawa High School. At the same time, the girls were walking down the street discussing how Makoto had acted unusually darkly during his investigation. When Mio assumed the woman in the picture was somehow connected to him, Tomoe said it was impossible since he had no friends in that world. Tomoe then said they needed to find the missing girl quickly to pull Makoto out of his gloomy mood, and Mio agreed, so she set off to do it. As Makoto and Rinan moved through the city, he assured her that his girls would find her sister, for which she thanked him. Before her sister was kidnapped, Rinan was angry because they were in debt again, but her sister assured her that she would get it back if she tried her best. However, one day he returned, looking as if he had been in a fight, and asked Rinan to go to another town called Siege because he needed to work to pay off his debt. Sometime later, Rinan was counting her last few coins when she overheard some ruffians plotting to kidnap her to settle her sister's debt. This prompted her to run as fast as she could until she stumbled upon a suspicious adventurer who claimed she could never escape him. As she returned to the present, Rinan's sister lay unconscious in a room, reflecting on her family's history of adventure. One of her relatives had once been defeated in battle against a powerful monster, and they had lost their family's prized short sword. Because of this, Rinan's sister ventured into the wasteland, to the farthest corner of the world, to find him. As she lay helpless on the floor, she apologized to Rinan for dying a fraud, but then she saw Tomoe and Mio. When Mio realized she had been used as a guinea pig for magical experiments, she healed her and melted the door, opening it with her magic. As they walked away with her, a man approached them whom Rinan's sister identified as Zetsuya's strongest adventurer, Mills. Meanwhile, Makoto and Rinan arrived at the inn, but she suddenly left him to meet an assassin in a dark alley. Using his keen observation, Kai overheard the enemy ordering Rinan to steal from him in exchange for her sister's safety. At the same time, Mills revealed himself as the leader of the evil adventurers and asked Mio and Tomoe to join him, but they immediately refused. When he insulted Makoto, they tried to destroy him with powerful attacks, but he blocked them with a magic barrier. However, Tomoe broke through the barrier, and the two girls went berserk, easily decimating the entire group of enemy adventurers. Mills tried to take Rinan's sister hostage, but they knocked him away. They proceeded to destroy the city with their powers in a pointless fight to see who was stronger. When they returned to the inn, Rinan's sister Toa thanked them, and after Makoto fell asleep, he punished the girls for destroying the city. The next day, Makoto and the girls boarded a carriage with Mills' former captives, and they all headed to the next town, Saiji. A while later, the guild receptionist was alarmed when she heard that Zetsuya was destroyed, and one of the former captives told her that a horde of monsters had ravaged the city. Makoto was relieved because the adventurer's memories had been altered using Tomoe's technique, with the exception of Rinan and Toa. However, he noticed that Mio was pouting because he had added 2 more girls to the party. When the receptionist asked if there were still monsters in Zetsuya, the adventurer named Mio and Tomoe and banished them all with his level 1000 abilities. Makoto told the receptionist they were registered as adventurers in Zetsuya, but she informed him they would have to re-register in Saiji since their information hadn't been sent from Zetsuya before its destruction. He then approached Tomoe and convinced her to accept the task of becoming a knight-errant. After leaving to train, Mio celebrated the fact that she would finally have some time alone with Makoto, but ended up going on an excursion with Makoto and the rest of the girls. At that moment, Makoto sensed some monstrous insects on the path, so he sent Mio to deal with them. When she confronted these creatures, it only took a flick of her fan to reduce them to rubble. Everything was in ruins, and everyone praised her for being as powerful as Gojo. After the battle, Makoto suggested they continue on, but Toa said it would be better to gather materials from the defeated monsters, as they were valuable. Makoto tried to remind her that the road ahead was still long, but then he noticed her elite attributes and was so charmed that he told her to do whatever she wanted. When he noticed Rinan and Mio giving him disapproving looks, he explained that he was just trying to learn the basics of material gathering. Things got complicated when Toa cracked open an insect's head, and Makoto was horrified because she was performing barbaric acts while wearing Hasegawa's face. After a few days of travel, travel, they reached an area near Sige where they saw some rare insect monsters called ruby eyes. When Mio stood up to handle the situation, the others warned her not to harm the creature too much, so she gave up and asked Makoto to take care of it instead. Makoto was surprised by what he explained was a nuisance because the idiots in the back seat constantly subjected him to stressful demands during attacks. When Makoto asked about the ruby eye's weak point, Toa said it was on their abdomen and added that it was a difficult place to reach. Nevertheless, Makoto pressed on and proved to be an impressive archer as he took down the ruby eyes one by one. After the battle, the others praised Makoto for his archery skills, and he immediately set off to gather some materials from the monsters' corpses. When they arrived in Sige, Makoto successfully re-registered as an adventurer and was given an identity document stating that he was still at level 1. This disappointed him because he thought that defeating the so-called rare bee monsters on his own would raise his level. Then she looked at the mission board and discovered a special rank mission. As she read the mission sheet, she saw it was from a client called Rembrandt Trading Company, who were searching for the ruby eyes. At that moment, Toe approached her to thank her for helping her level up during the trip and asked her to share the materials with him. During the division of materials, Makoto was given one of each material and 12 ruby eyes. When she apologized for taking the rarest material, Toe said it was fine because he was the one who defeated them. Realizing it was time to say goodbye, everyone started acting gloomy, so Makoto suggested celebrating their trip together. This cheered everyone up, and Toe said she would choose a restaurant before exchanging contact information with him. That night, Makoto and Mio arrived at the butcher shop Toa had chosen for their party, and the first thing she noticed was a huge, manga-style meat on the table. After sharing a toast with the gang, Makoto began to feast on the meat and was very impressed by how delicious it tasted. While eating, one of her adventurous friends named Luisa started asking her questions about her archery skills. Before she could answer, an alchemy master in the group named Hazal, who was already lost in thought, interrupted and asked her to train with him sometime. While Makoto was trying to reply, a dwarf adventurer in the group named Ranina brought some more drinks and challenged them to an arm wrestling match. When their arm wrestling began, Makoto easily defeated her anyway, and Mio brought them more food to celebrate. Shortly after, Makoto told Toa about working at the Rembrandt Trading Company, and she warned her that bad things happened to people who accepted jobs there. The next morning, they returned to the demiplane where they met up with the mini Tomo and Emma. As they walked forward, Emma explained that all the creatures were working together to build different parts of the city, and the orcs were specifically constructing their castle. She worried that it would require a lot of manpower and time, but Emma said it was fine because they were using their memories as a construction map. When she asked about Tomo, Emma said she hadn't heard from her, but their conversation was interrupted when Elder appeared to speak with Makoto. He gifted Makoto a suit of elite armor, but Makoto declined the cosplay and opted for a coat made by the same boy who made her ring. After she put it on, Elder explained that it provided elite defense and that he had changed the coat to a red form that prioritized mobility over defense. However, the suit was destroyed due to the excess mana it absorbed from Makoto, so he promised to make her a better one. Later, Makoto met some elk named Akina, Hokuto, and Minato, who gave him some deadly crops they had gathered. The next day, Makoto arrived at the Rembrandt Trading Company full of enthusiasm, but the boss immediately dismissed him. Meanwhile, a man asked the receptionist about the person who had accepted Rembrandt's job, and the receptionist gave a description of Makoto that worried him. At the Rembrandt Trading Company, the group's leader, Patrick Rembrandt, asked Makoto why he hadn't heard of him despite being very familiar with adventurers. Makoto replied that he was an E-rank adventurer who hadn't yet landed his first job, and added that he was planning to eventually start his own business and join the Merchant Guild. Rembrandt realized that Makoto's plan was to establish a connection with his company, so he told Makoto that he had nothing more to say to him. As Makoto sat in silence, Rembrandt said he was disappointed in him for not having investigated the ruby eyes more thoroughly, and Makoto was relieved because it was the reaction he had expected. Rembrandt then stated that there was no way someone of Makoto's caliber could capture a rare monster like the ruby eyes, but Makoto dropped the eyes directly onto the table. This astonished Rembrandt, and he apologized for doubting Makoto. When Makoto asked why he needed the eyes, Rembrandt said his intention was to create a special medicine called ambrosia that could cure the cursed disease afflicting his wife and daughters caused by a sorcerer's ritual. His butler, Morris, added that it was a level 8 cursed disease, meaning they would die unless given some ambrosia. Makoto requested to be present when the drug was manufactured, and when Rembrandt asked why, he explained that he would be accompanied by a master alchemist who could save them time. This pleased Rembrandt, as he had felt nothing but despair during his quest, and declared that he had taken the first step towards solving his problem. When Makoto asked what he meant, he said that 2 eyes were needed to make enough medicine for 1 person. Makoto then gave him 6 ruby eyes to save all the members of his family. Rembrandt and his butler, Morris, immediately began to weep, and soon other company employees rushed into the room to celebrate with them. The touching sight brought a smile to Makoto's face, and she received a receipt from Rembrandt, who informed her that the medicine would be prepared another day. When Makoto arrived at the Merchant Guild, the receptionist informed her that she had to pass 2 tests to join the guild, so she asked for more information. She revealed that the tests could be administered at any time and showed him a guild manual he could use to prepare for the written exam. She also stated that he would be given a practical test if he passed the written exam, where he would be asked to gather some easily obtainable materials or parts of dangerous monsters. He would be required to demonstrate his financial strength if he passed both tests with either a deposit or an annual fee, but if he failed, he would be barred from taking the exam again for 6 months. When he asked for a manual, she said it cost 2 gold pieces, and he was shocked because it was so expensive. As an alternative, she suggested studying while working at a trading company, but Makoto declined the offer and gave her some money to buy a manual. Sometime later, Makoto finished memorizing the prohibited items and obtained the product license from the manual, and the test instructor entered. When the test began, the instructor started boasting about how difficult the questions were, but he was astonished when Makoto finished in seconds. He accused Makoto of being indifferent to the exam, but when he looked through Makoto's answer sheets, he saw that she had achieved a perfect score despite her quick completion time. For the item acquisition test, he asked Makoto to choose a ball from a box, and when she did, she noticed that her ball looked strange. According to the instructions, this meant she had to obtain 4 materials, including an apple, a new Tesla, an Omnitrix, and a Howling Fang. Upon hearing this, Makoto panicked because she remembered that the Howling Fang was listed as a difficult material. This pleased the instructor, who informed Makoto that she had to bring these items, or something of equal value, to the guild within 3 days. When the instructor revealed that he needed to be at least level 50 to obtain those items, Makoto remembered that everyone he was traveling with was over level 100. Since they hadn't been able to defeat the Ruby Eyes, he realized that the materials from those monsters were worth more than the test items. He then presented the Ruby Eye materials as items of equal value, and the instructor was startled before congratulating him on passing the exam with flying colors. Elsewhere, TAME defeated a group of powerful monsters and boasted of his knightly deeds. When he returned to the demiplane, he and his men feasted on the monster remains until an orc arrived to inform him that Mio was eating Makoto's memories. He rushed to stop Mio only to find her translating Makoto's memories into books, and the ladies discussed their plans to eat Makoto's sausage. The next day, Makoto returned to the demiplane and ate some fruit with little Tomoe, who told him how strange the weather had been the past few days. Their conversation was interrupted when Tomo called him about an emergency, but when he arrived, he found the girls fighting over their memories of the weapons. After separating them, he gave Mio permission to watch some anime from her memories and scolded Tomo for slacking off. That night at the inn, the girls tried to tempt Makoto to jump into bed with them, but he ignored them and rested on the sofa, where he suddenly received a text message from Hazal. The following morning, he met Hazal, who was delighted to join him in preparing the ambrosia. As they walked, 2 adventurers in a dark alley plotted against them. Some time ago, the sorcerer was chained up after being beaten by Morris, but he still boasted about his curse. So Rembrandt gave Morris the go-ahead to cut him down. Currently, Makoto and Hazal were sitting at Rembrandt's company headquarters, and Makoto apologized for not having told her the whole story sooner. However, Hazal expressed concern that she might be harmed if she took the company's bad side, and was startled when she heard the door open. At that moment, Rembrandt arrived with Morris and announced that preparations had been made before inviting them to the laboratory. When they arrived, Morris informed them that everything they needed was on the table, and Hazal read an instruction manual that taught her how to create the drug. She was surprised that the process was short, so Morris explained that the medicine wasn't difficult to produce once the unique extraction process was complete. After drawing some inscriptions on the floor, Hazal said a prayer to the goddess, which annoyed Makoto since she was her arch enemy. When he noticed Hazal wasn't synchronizing her magic correctly, he helped her with his own. Hazal asked how her magic could be completed with an incomplete spell, so Makoto made her believe it was her imagination. When they started producing the drug, Morris explained that ruby eyes were used as substitutes because ambrosia flowers were difficult to obtain. Hearing this, Makoto smiled, realizing he could become an Elon Musk isekai if he managed to make ambrosia flowers the flagship product of his Kuzunoha trading company. In no time, Hazal completed a dose of the wonderful ambrosia drug and handed it to Morris, who immediately ran off to give it to Rembrandt. When Hazal finished the other 2 drugs, she breathed a sigh of relief, but when Morris suddenly returned, he accidentally threw them into the air. Seeing this, Makoto caught one of the drugs in midair and used Kai, the investigator, to locate the other falling drug before using water magic to dive toward it. Realizing his hands wouldn't reach it in time, Makoto used his back to break his fall. When Makoto asked Morris what was wrong, he led him to a room where they saw that Rembrandt had been injured in the arm. Rembrandt explained that his wife had suddenly attacked him when he tried to administer the drug, but the guards had barely managed to subdue her. Upon hearing this, Hazal revealed that it was caused by an obstacle woven into the cursed disease that prevented him from administering the medicine. Rembrandt then narrated how his wife's illness began as a mild fever, but eventually transformed her into a monster. As he drowned in misery, Makoto considered calling the Toa group or his 2 monstrous girls for help, but changed his mind and asked Rembrandt to take him to his wife. He promised to restrain her long enough for the medicine to be administered and ordered Hazal to prepare another dose of the drug using the remaining ingredients. Rembrandt doubted that someone like like him could restrain his wife, but Hazel assured him that Makoto would be fine since he was the one who killed the Ruby Eyes. After Morris corroborated his claim, Makoto completed his aura cultivation by peeling back his cloak and assuring Rembrandt that he would break the curse. A few minutes later, Makoto entered a room and noticed some of the ambrosia drug spilled on the floor, so he took a sample of it on a cloth. When they reached the wife's room, Makoto decided to lure her using the scent of the drug, but his plan worked too well when the wife burst through his door to attack him. Makoto dodged her attacks and decided to stop her in a way that wouldn't hurt her too much. When Rembrandt ran toward them, Makoto told her to back off and used judo moves to restrain her before asking her to administer the medicine. When Rembrandt tried to cover her mouth, she bit his hand, but he still managed to pour the drug into her mouth and cure her of her illness. Makoto entered one of the daughters' rooms, and when he activated his investigative Kai, he noticed one of them hanging from the corner of the room like a Spider-Man. She charged at him, but he dodged her attack and grabbed her, allowing Rembrandt to pour the drug into her mouth. As Hazel ran toward them to deliver the final dose, she slipped again and threw the drug into the air, but Morris caught it with a few quick movements. When Makoto reached the second daughter's room, she attacked him, but he managed to hold her down long enough for Rembrandt to administer the drug. Shortly after, Rembrandt thanked Makoto for his help and asked if he was a disciple of Goku, but he lied, saying he was merely a merchant in training. Makoto walked toward the main gate where he met Mio and Tomoe, but their conversation was interrupted when a wizard tried to roast them with a flame spell. Makoto dodged the attack and worried about his girls, but they simply blew the attack away like a candle flame. When he asked why they hadn't dodged it, Tomoe explained that they were trying to assess the assassin's strength because they noticed he had been following them since leaving the inn. At that moment, more assassins appeared, and when their leader asked the girls to join them, Mio suddenly agreed. However, it was all part of Makoto's plan because he didn't want the same destruction to be repeated in Zetsuya, and Tomoe easily dispatched the group of assassins. When one of the leaders tried to escape using a teleportation spell, Makoto crushed him and sent him sprawling to the ground. The other leader, Sega's #1 adventurer, Lime Latte, tried to attack them, but Tomoe quickly took him down. When questioned, Lime told the group how he had been recruited by the witch doctor and asked to use his cursed drug against Rembrandt's family, so they let him go. Afterward, Lime apologized to Rembrandt and told him he was retiring from adventuring. Sometime later, Tomoe met Lime at the orphanage he was running and gave him a katana before hiring him to become his personal spy. That night, he overheard Rembrandt plotting against Makoto, which made him realize that Rembrandt wasn't a good person. The next morning, Emma informed Makoto and the girls that their warriors had lost confidence in training with them due to the overwhelming power difference between them. When Mio suggested they stop training for a while, Tomoe said they'd think they'd been abandoned, and the two idiots started arguing until Makoto told them to stop. Makoto decided to check on his crew, and Emma said it was a great idea but informed him that the orcs were taking a break. When he asked Tomoe to speak to the lizard men for him, she complained that he was being a nuisance, so Mio called her lazy scum. In response, he asked Mio to also check on his elk clan, but Mio stated that the elk weren't experiencing any training-related dissatisfaction. Makoto added that each elk was individually strong but didn't train much because they were busy with medicine production and alchemy. He then asked Mio to accompany him, and she immediately agreed. She arrived at the forest where two orcs were talking, and Makoto used a version of her Kai power to eavesdrop while hiding. One of the orcs claimed that training with Mio and Tomoe was fine, because even though they couldn't harm them, they would allow them to launch an attack if they were skilled enough. However, he said that Makoto was worse because she shot fire arrows before either of them could even get close and roasted anyone who resisted the arrows anyway. As they walked back, Makoto said she regretted not holding back during the training runs, but Mio interrupted to glaze the tomatoes she was eating. This prompted Makoto to give her a full lecture about tomatoes, which made her consider cooking one of the dishes from Ratatouille. When Makoto asked Tomoe how the lizard men were doing, she said the situation was bad because they were less than 10% as strong as she had expected. Makoto then pointed out that the different species didn't exchange much information with each other, and added that it would be great if the lizard men and orcs imitated each other's fighting styles. When Tomoe started trolling Emma, she explained that they should focus on improving their fighting tactics instead of hiding them, and this gave Tomoe an idea. Sometime later, all the orcs and lizard men gathered in an arena, and Tomoe announced that the strongest warriors of each species would fight to prove their strength. However, Makoto realized that they were basically about to have a death match. When it was time to start the tournament, little Tomoe announced that an orc named Agars would represent the Highland orcs, while a lizardman named Liddy would represent the Mist lizardmen. She then announced the start of the battle, and Liddy fired a breath attack at Agars, but the orc withstood the attack, so he tried to cut him with a sword. However, Agars blocked her attack with a force field and slammed the platform into the ground with such force that it shattered. At first, Makoto was startled, but when she remembered Tomoe's advice to keep her expression blank during the fight, her face softened. Liddy then unleashed one of the most powerful airbending moves, piercing Agars' armor and creating an opening for him to attack the orc again. Agars grabbed him and threw him to the ground. Seeing this, the small Tomoe stopped the fight and declared Agars the winner, but Agars noticed that Makoto didn't seem impressed. Tomoe then declared that despite how hard they fought, they were both desperate and asked why they weren't stronger than they currently were. When she pointed to an orc to answer the question, he said that they fought well from his perspective, though they hadn't lived up to his expectations. However, she stated aloud that they were currently less than 10% as strong as she had imagined, making them a bunch of nobodies. This left them speechless, and Makoto whispered that she was being a bit harsh, but she ignored him and said they needed warriors strong enough to rely on. She then admitted that their strength hadn't been properly measured and announced that once every 7 days, everyone would participate in individual competitions. In each match, they would assess each individual's strength to rank them, and she would also discuss the idea with the Alki and the dwarves. When some orcs complained that their tactics would be revealed to each other, she called them fools and said they shouldn't worry about anyone finding out. When the invisible microphone was handed to Makoto, he said he agreed with everything Tomo had said and revealed that he was planning to help them strengthen each other. Just as Makoto started thinking of a name for the tournament, Tomo announced that the demi-plane rankings would be arriving soon. A few hours later, the guild receptionist checked the girls' rankings and screamed in fear as the ladies once again surpassed 1,000. She then asked Makoto for help training new adventurers to become powerful, so she agreed to assist in Toa's group's training. When they returned to the demi-plane, she asked Tomo to train Toa's group, and she agreed because she knew how much Toa meant to her. However, she put them through the most grueling training imaginable and saved them from a gorilla attack before teaching them a strategy that helped them defeat the monsters. For the next stage of their test, she sent them to raid a lair of monstrous gorillas on their own, and the receptionist thought it was impossible, but they succeeded. A few days later, Makoto asked Mio to find some ambrosia flowers and revealed that he was opening a shop. Sometime later, he ran into Rembrandt and asked to rent one of his spaces for a shop, but Rembrandt discovered that Makoto planned to use the space for espionage. However, he agreed to help him and directed him to a city where he could open his business. Somewhere in a forest, a humble woman named Eris was ranting about some adventurers who dared to enter her woods. When she asked her companion Aqua if she had woken them up, Aqua said they were still alive but claimed she would have killed them if they had touched the red lotuses. Back on the demi-plane, the girls evaluated Makoto using magic, and at that moment, the little Tomoe arrived and announced that everything was ready. Shortly after, Makoto went up on stage with Tomo and announced they were throwing a party to celebrate the launch of their new business. Their cheers made him feel shy, so he asked Tomo why she wasn't speaking as usual, but she replied that he was the one everyone wanted to hear. When the little Tomo handed him a drink, he thanked her and patted her on the head, which caused both versions of Tomo to react strangely. Then Mio arrived with some food she found inside and thought about feeding Makoto, but saw he was already stuffing himself. When Tomo noticed people eagerly watching Makoto, he dragged Mio away to give himself space to address them. Akina then arrived and reintroduced herself to Makoto before revealing that she had learned to remain transformed for extended periods. After handing her a book about ambrosia, she explained that they couldn't bring in certain resources because of a species that guards the forests. Makoto said that was fine because he knew that harvesting them carelessly would cause problems. She thanked him for helping the elk settle in and told him how her elk allies, including Haruna, Minato, and Hokuto, had all participated in different constructive activities in the kingdom. After she left, Liddy approached Makoto and told him that she had acquired new tactics through their joint training, which allowed her to finally defeat Agars. Makoto was impressed by this and went on to say that she had been training with Tomoe to prepare for the demi-plane ranking in 3 months. Makoto was worried that Tomo's influence was taking over the demi-plane. A few hours later, Makoto had a drink with Baron, who asked him how Tsige was, and he replied that it was a very lively place. During their conversation, Makoto mentioned that Baron hadn't left the demi-plane since arriving and asked if he found it stifling. However, Baron said he was very happy to be Makoto's craftsman, and Makoto replied that he was relieved to hear that. He then stated that he was curious to know if weapons were popular outside the demi-plane, and because of this, Makoto asked him to manage his shop in Tsige. Baron was confused, so Makoto explained that dwarves were known for being excellent blacksmiths, which meant people would hire him to make weapons, and Baron happily accepted the offer. After Baron left, the orc Makoto had healed earlier came to see him and revealed that he had been assigned to the next shift of guiding adventurers to their illusory city. Makoto knew that the illusory city was a fictional city invented to distribute products that only existed on the demi-plane, so he apologized for forcing him to do that for his business. However, the orc said he was fine and confessed that he always wanted to do something for him, which prompted everyone in the crowd to shout their support. In the forest, Mio told Tomoe about the creatures guarding the ambrosia, but Tomo asked her not to include it in her report so Makoto wouldn't worry. Tomo then noticed she couldn't sense Makoto nearby and guessed he had returned to his mansion, but suddenly her senses began to tingle severely. When Mio started to panic, Tomo reassured her, informing her that Makoto's presence had returned and asking her to accompany her in dealing with the matter at hand. They soon arrived at a spot in the forest where Makoto was practicing archery, and Mio immediately ran to hug him. When she asked Tomoe if they were under attack, she said no and asked if he was training with a bow. After he confirmed that he was a demon, she angrily declared that he could have died countless times during his training, but Makoto was still confused by her words. He then asked her to explain her archery technique, and as she did, she revealed that she extended her consciousness to the target and then reconstituted herself. With tears in her eyes, Mio told him that people can only spread their consciousness when they die, which made his training sessions seem as if he were undoing himself. Tomoe then pointed out that his mana was increasing at an absurd rate and revealed that his constant dying and rebirth during training was causing his mana to rise. He then revealed that his current mana production was on par with the goddesses and added that his increased mana had caused the demiplane to expand. This was a problem because the goddess would make a move to eliminate him if she discovered it, so Tomo suggested getting him an enhanced armor that absorbs mana. The next day, Makoto was walking through town when a call girl began to tempt him with her ample assets, but before he could retreat, a duo of monstrous girls dragged him away. When they returned to the inn, the girls tried to force intimate situations, but he stopped them with an ice door and escaped. The following day, he was given an upgraded version of the mana-suppressing rings, and Mio came to apologize for her antics the night before. When she mentioned the ambrosia flowers, Makoto asked her to accompany him to the forest to pick them, and she immediately agreed. They soon arrived at the ambrosia field in the forest and walked peacefully until Eris and Aqua appeared to confront them. Things spiraled out of control when some adventurers appeared to take the flowers for themselves. When the forest guardians began to attack them, Makoto protected himself and the adventurers using defensive kai. As they ran through the forest, Makoto suddenly heard a telepathic message from Tomo, who was watching the events unfold as if they were watching a movie. When he asked for her help, she refused because of her date with Mio, and he tried to deny her claims, but she mentioned how he had been holding Mio's hand earlier. She then gave him permission to dedicate himself to katana making and rice cultivation, which made her so happy that she agreed to help him. She asked him to create a smoke screen that would allow her to summon a fog gate, but Makoto feared this would lead the enemy to her illusory city. However, Tomoe said it was all part of her plan and added that they could feed Mio some of her favorite foods to keep her entertained. When Eris and Aqua approached, Makoto threw flames at the adventurers, forcing them into a portal and cast an ice spell that injured one of their hands. Then he gave the blood to Mio, who happily drank it like a vampire before thanking him for the delicious meal. The forest guardians were confused by the suspicious events they had just witnessed but prepared for battle nonetheless. When Eris tried to attack them with an ice spell, Mio consumed her mana with dark magic before she could finish her enchantment. Makoto then cast a light spell that temporarily blinded the enemy duo, allowing him to destroy both wands with a fire spell. He then asked Mio to tie them up. Meanwhile, the adventurers were trying to figure out where they were when little Tomo appeared and welcomed them to the illusory city. At the same time, Makoto explained to the guardian girls that he had come to talk, not to steal their flowers, adding that he was a merchant interested in buying goods. The girls decided to take them to their village. Shortly after, they arrived at the forest ogre village, and Makoto noticed that the entire village was surrounded by a hidden barrier that seemed very familiar. As they walked onward, Aqua explained that the barrier protected the red lotuses and their village, and they asked Makoto to release her restraints so she could guide them to the elders. They eventually met a man named Neil, who was the chief of the elders. When he welcomed them to the forest ogre village, Mio was surprised that they weren't elves. Neil explained that unlike elves, who drew their power from spirits, he and his people could only manage the forest using what they knew. At that moment, Neil's son, Adano, arrived and said that they weren't a different species from elves. After exchanging greetings with Makoto, he explained that his species were the ancestors of the elves and had created the forests from which the elves drew their power. Adano then scolded his father for insisting they stay in the forest, even though the dragon barrier had weakened, but Makoto didn't understand what he meant by dragon barrier. When Makoto claimed that he and Mio were merchants, Adano asked how they managed to defeat Eris and Aqua. He then lied, saying he had studied all the best wrestling moves. Adano said he chose to believe them for the time being, and after they left, Neil apologized for his son's rudeness. Later that night, Aqua informed Makoto and Mio that they would be holding a banquet to apologize for their earlier harsh treatment and invited them to meet her master. However, Makoto was so frightened that he declined the offer, and Eris tried to persuade him, but that only made him more scared. At that moment, a strange fellow named Mondo burst through the wall as the cool assistant and introduced himself as their master. As he shook Makoto's hand, he started talking nonsense, which made Mio jealous, and she punched him. While on the ground, he realized that neither Makoto nor Mio were ordinary humans, so he lit a cigarette and decided he would make them regret ever meeting him. Meanwhile, Makoto ordered Mio to investigate Adano and Mondo, and she happily agreed before teleporting through a dark portal. As she observed them, she noticed that both men were acting strangely, but had no idea they were connected to demons. When she reported her findings to Makoto, he asked her to switch places with Tomoe on the demiplane because he wanted to find something out. During the party that night, a skeleton demon suddenly appeared and destroyed Mondo and Adano. When Makoto approached it, it admitted that Makoto was the one it wanted, and Makoto realized it was a lich. When he tried to attack Makoto with a spell, he counterattacked by absorbing the spell as well as the demon's aura, reducing him to a mere bag of bones. After Tomo teleported the demon away, she revealed herself to Neil and the orcs as the dragon who had lifted their barrier, and they all worshipped her. However, she told them to worship Makoto since he was their master, which left them speechless. A while later, the lich Lich told Makoto that his plan was to become a Grant, a superior version of humans who could travel between worlds. However, Tomoe said that was impossible because the true meaning of Grant was ordinary humans like Makoto's parents, who had successfully crossed over to another world. When Makoto asked if it was possible to travel between worlds, she said there was only a 10% chance of success even if they found a way. He then encouraged the Lich to form a contract with Makoto, and both parties agreed. After the contract was formed, the Lich transformed into a handsome young man, and after putting on a coat, he thanked Makoto for accepting him. At that moment, Tomoe's dragon senses activated, and everyone heard an explosion before he suddenly collapsed. As blood streamed from Tomoe's face, Makoto wondered what was happening and asked Mio to stop the bleeding before telling the Lich to accompany him to the site of the explosion. They ran to a spot in the forest where the Lich collapsed from exhaustion. He explained that he couldn't run very well because he wasn't used to running through flesh and blood. He added that it would be better to save his mana to heal the wounded rather than waste it getting there, and Makoto was surprised that the Lich could use healing magic. The Lich said he was quite good at it, so Makoto asked him to perform a healing spell from where they were standing. Upon hearing this, the Lich stood up and activated a healing spell that transported Makoto to a young orc girl mourning an injured Hokuto. When he noticed Hokuto wasn't breathing, he recognized the feeling from when his dog died in his early years, and this terrified him. The Lich then informed him that he had healed everyone in the vicinity and added that Hokuto was the most severely injured among them, which meant he was still alive. This relieved Makoto, but the Lich asked him to use his healing magic on Hokuto as well to support his own healing abilities. However, Makoto knew he could only heal people using his Kai, and when he activated his Kai healing field, it had no effect on Hokuto. He felt useless for not knowing any healing magic, but then an idea struck him when he realized he could combine spells to perform healing magic. To do this, he cast a Kai healing field over the already active healing spell, successfully bringing Hokuto back to life. Afterward, the orc girl gave him a necklace that had belonged to an orc he knew, and directed him to a place where the orc was trying to fight off enemy humans. When Makoto arrived, he saw explosion marks on the ground and wondered if the blast had opened the side gate, which they had opened before. He then sensed some adventurers on the other side of the gate, as well as Tomoe's fragment and the orc. As his consciousness suddenly faded, he remembered Mio's words, and this frightened him so much that he rushed to question one of the adventurers. Immediately upon regaining consciousness, he heard a voice in his head plotting against him, and recognized it as one of the adventurers he had met in the forest. He then saw several flashbacks showing the girl and her group stealing from his storehouse. When little Tomoe and the others tried to stop them, she threw Makoto's magic ring at them, and it immediately exploded. When the girl woke up, she was relieved to have survived the explosion, but then she saw Makoto walking toward her, looking like a terrifying villain. She couldn't understand what was happening, but Makoto explained with a vengeful glint in his eyes that she had survived the explosion thanks to little Tomo's spell. When he approached her, she tried to keep him away, but he told her with a cold look that he wished he had killed her. Then he drew his sword and boasted about being a high-level adventurer, but that didn't scare him. He drew his dagger and continued walking toward her. When she charged at him, he blocked her attack and cut off both her arms before she could scream in pain. He threw her to the ground and told her that her life ceased to matter at that moment because she had killed the orc and Tomo's fragment. With tears and blood streaming from her face, she begged him to leave, but instead, he struck her in the neck, causing her to bleed to death. At that moment, Makoto realized it was the first time she had intentionally killed someone, and tears suddenly began to stream from her eyes. She wondered if it was because she had stained her hands with blood, or because she had lost her friends. However, she wept even more when she realized that the reason she was crying was because dying was sad in the world she lived in. The next day, the people of the demiplane mourned their fallen comrades, and Makoto acted normally during the funeral, even though she was drowning in guilt. Shortly afterward, Makoto named Lich Shiki and asked Tomoe if his contract obligated him to a hybrid form that blended all his species into one. However, Shiki explained that no part of their contract entered his body, and Tomoe added that he was able to use his memory control powers thanks to their shared bond. Shortly after, Haruna informed Makoto that Hokuto's injuries had healed and ordered them to take turns with the lizard men to protect the illusory city. He then met with the dwarves and instructed them on how to manage the goods coming from Sige. He then visited the orc's friend who had died and apologized for letting his friend die. The next day, Rembrandt directed him to a city called Rotsgard on business and revealed his true face in return for their kindness. During lunch, Makoto told everyone he was going to an academy to learn more about his world and gave them some souvenirs as parting gifts. Not long after, he said goodbye to his people and left the demiplane with Shiki. However, on his way to the academy, he was suddenly teleported by the goddess to a strange land where he was attacked by warriors named Sophia and Mitsurugi. When he saw that Sophia's attack had severed his fingers, he realized she was under her control. While Makoto tried to calm himself, Mitsurugi asked him if he was a demi-human, but Sophia replied that the goddess would never choose one. When Makoto heard this, he realized his current situation was the goddess's doing and tried to communicate with her minions telepathically, but received no response. Sophia thought he was ignoring them, so she attacked him again, and he managed to block her attacks with a Kai barrier. When Makoto noticed his injury was more serious than it seemed, he tied his hand with a bowstring to reduce the bleeding, which impressed Sophia. She asked him if he was a human-based chimera, but Makoto angrily replied that he was human before asking who they were. When he pointed out that he hadn't done anything to them, Sophia explained that he was their enemy because they had sided with the demons instead of the humans. Makoto couldn't understand what she was saying, but he extended his Kai observation of the area and discovered that a war between demons and humans was about to erupt below. This made him wonder if he had somehow become involved in their war, and Mitsurugi stated that he was preventing the demons from advancing before asking Sophia to finish him off. When she approached him, Makoto decided to stall, so he switched to his equipment's red mode, which made Mitsurugi realize that mana was converging in the area. At that moment, Makoto unleashed a barrage of flame attacks, and while they blocked his onslaught, he activated his hidden Kai and tried to flee the area. However, he realized that a wall of swords had appeared behind him, and when he tried to run forward, more blades kept erupting from the ground, hindering his movement. Sophia then asked Mitsurugi to create some footholds for her, and he did so by conjuring swords in the air. Suddenly, she appeared behind him. Makoto managed to block her attack, but she broke through the barrier and unleashed a brutal blow that sent him flying backward. Makoto was relieved, knowing things would have ended badly if he hadn't been wearing his coat, and Sophia complimented him on his incredible physique. She assumed the goddess was protecting him, so she put on a ring to cancel the protection, but Makoto angrily retorted that he hadn't received any protection from the trash goddess. Hearing this, Mitsurugi countered, pointing out that he had arrived there in a light that closely resembled the goddess's aura. Makoto said he had no idea about that and claimed he didn't want to fight them, but they interpreted his words as him begging for his life. When they asked his name, he asked them to introduce themselves first. So Mitsurugi introduced Sophia as the famous dragon hunter and himself as someone known as Lancer. This made him realize that Sophia was the strongest adventurer the Zetsuya receptionist had told him all about, and he had introduced himself as an ordinary merchant. However, Mitsurugi said he was lying, and Sophia declared that they would kill him. As they prepared to attack him again, he activated his strengthening Kai at full power, creating a wave of aura that sent them flying. He then switched to Kai investigation, which helped him locate them within the smoke, and drew a special blade. He then created a flaming bow and arrow and used them to shoot at them. Sophia tried to evade the attack, but it suddenly split and pierced both defenses with ease. Makoto then created a bow and arrow of water, and when he fired them, Mitsurugi tried to block with a water shield, but he easily destroyed it and froze it. When Sophia attacked Makoto again, he destroyed her sword using his special blade, then hugged him tightly, pressing his face against her enormous breasts. This wasn't just a cuddle. She held him in place for a sword attack Mitsurugi had prepared for him and teleported him high into the sky so he could descend upon them. As he fell, he destroyed all the swords with fireballs and unleashed a massive jet of water that obliterated the entire area. When Makoto awoke, he realized he was back home on the demiplane and then noticed his two monstrous companions sleeping beside him. Sometime later, Makoto explained everything that had happened to the others, and Shiki deduced that the goddess had sent him there in an attempt to force him to fight the demons. When he mentioned that he was going back to school, the girls offered to follow him, but he refused because he wanted to protect them from the goddess. Tomoe then presented him with another fragment of herself, which she named Komoe because of its small size. Sometime later, Makoto's shop officially opened in Siga, and they immediately demonstrated their superior quality during their first marketing campaign. As they watched everyone having fun, Makoto reflected on how his mana blasts on the battlefield had caused numerous deaths. That afternoon, he sat, alone in a field, thinking about everyone he loved in the human realm, and resolved to do everything he could to stop being a fraud. Just then, Emma came to call him for a farewell party that everyone was organizing for him, and as soon as he saw her, he remembered how he had met them all. When he arrived at the party, the sight of everyone enjoying themselves made him grateful for being isekai-ized, but he changed his mind when he saw the girls fighting again. One has to wonder if one were Makoto, which isekai girl he would hide his sacred arrow in first, Tomoe or Mio, or perhaps he would go crazy and slap the goddesses across the cheeks.